lot of people that I work with just are not happy in the sense that they feel that what they've got that makes them happy now is permanent. And they're confused about what happiness is. For this particular session of studying the mysteries, the mysterium, that which is hard to understand, is what equates to happiness for you? A question that was asked, how does this happiness even work?
How is it defined?
Yeah, how's it defined? How does it work? What does it mean? It's a concept that contains many, many other concepts and many other components. But I'd like to know what you think about happiness and why you continue on this path. What is it about this path that makes you happy? Let's start there. What is it about this path, this process of study, self-study, study of concepts, philosophies, that makes you happy?
The fact this is a constant and it'll always be there, because for me I'll tend to get bored with other things, but also the love of learning for me, there's always something new to learn within this. So it's kind of like almost a sense of well-being that comes from it.
A sense of well-being that comes from this. There's always something to learn. And how do you define that happiness? What does that mean for you inside? When you like learning this stuff, you say it makes me happy. It increases a sense of well-being. It causes pleasure. What?
Just like a sense of being better than I was before.
So there's a felt sense of improvement?
Yes.
It feels good because it feels like I'm constantly improving and getting better, and it just makes everything else I do a lot easier. Like decision making and confrontation and communication, and it feels good to understand me.
Okay, so now you've got more components. The self-understanding is one of the things you talked about. Being able to appreciate a little bit more who you are. What? Because you've improved, or because you know something that you didn't know before?
Because I've realized something consciously that I kind of already knew. Like that I had the strength, I guess, to allow myself to realize what I was doing rather than remaining in the delusion of it. And so it feels good becoming more aware.
When you talk about delusion, so delusion is a space that isn't very satisfying, shall we say?
I think for some people it is, but not.
Do you think they discover dissatisfaction in their delusion if they continue to embrace it, live in it, perpetrate it?
Definitely. And I think that's where like a lot of mental illnesses and addictions come from, because they're looking for the deeper meaning and other things.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that they make a mistake. They look for some kind of relief, maybe,
or
from the outside, when they're really looking for deeper meaning.
Well, I think another component to that is what you always talk about, how you meet people where they are. And material things do make some people very happy. And I feel like a lot of people live their entire life believing that. But it's kind of hard then because, well, how do we define happiness? And are they truly happy with that? But some of them might be.
I think some of them are. The pleasant life we're talking about right now, stage one, or the lowest level of so-called happiness, when everything's fairly at least neutral. You're not starving like many third world people. You're not in pain like many sick people. You're not lonely, utterly alone like many people are. You have people in your life.
Are some people meant to remain there and not improve? Because I feel like all of us are on the track to improvement, but are some people not? And I'd like to think that at some point they will, but are some people meant to just be like that?
That's another question.
I've been thinking that a lot recently, just like observing a lot of people in my everyday life. I'm just like, why are they there? But also, are they meant to be? Like, I've just been thinking that a lot.
But that's another question that has to do with the whole karmic idea of, why is one person who seems to be a good person stuck in this particular delusion or this particular physical pain why is someone else who seems to be just as good or not so good freed from it? That's a whole other question which we'll discuss. It's a good one. But right now, the idea here, a clue to this is that you can begin to think of happiness as the absence, and this is really important, the absence of many other things that would seem to make one happy but do not, don't have any staying power.
I was thinking about it, how we're kind of placed here in this earthly field, I guess, and level. And then the odds are stacked against us because we're placed with so many things that'll make us happy. But it's like, it's kind of just a test to look past it and find the true meaning of happiness.
Why is it that material things make us happy? Like, why are they there? Like, why do we find pleasure from them, you know?
Because it's like we're placed here and we're obviously supposed to for some extent, but at the same time, it's like that's not all there is and that's not all there can be.
But see, there's the insight, you know, we're made of material, right? We're made of meat. And so we need meat in order to exist, so to speak. So we're made that way, and so we're going to find some pleasure, at least, if not some happiness, in material things. But we also, those of us who have the opportunity, are wise enough now, some of us, to wake up and say, well, that's not going to satisfy me very long. Meat is not going to last. In fact, as my dear Muktananda says, if you want an illustration of that, put a piece of meat on your counter and put an apple on your counter and go away for 2 days and then come back and see which one you'll eat. The apple, for you vegans, will last longer, but both are dying, both are rotting, and both will become unedible at some point.
Because it's like true, obviously the meat's going to die quicker, but it's like they're both going to die in the end, which is weird.
They're both going. If it's possible for the meat to rot earlier and the apple to rot many days, maybe even weeks later, is it true then that this whole living and dying thing might be on a continuum ranging from you die instantly all the way to you never die? Is that possible? Even with meat or with the body? And that's been a consideration. Many ancient societies think that the body is going to be included. In fact, Christianity believes that your body will be included in your heavenly joy. This body that you're wearing, that's why the church for so long condemned things like burning the body. Even the Christian church has evolved beyond that and said, well, there's something bigger than that going on because many bodies are destroyed just naturally without any help from evil people. We don't see how they're going to be involved in this heavenly glory. So we think of that as something primitive now or not very viable, and so we think in terms of a state of mind. And that's why we're talking about happiness now. So we've been at a level now talking about happiness at a basic pleasure level. Body. The mind's included. If you have a boat, that's a pleasure level. If you go get a massage, that's the pleasure level. But the mind's involved because without it, you wouldn't feel anything, whether it's a boat or a massage, you wouldn't feel it. So you have to have the mind there as well, which we think the brain lives in, so that the mind is limitless, and the brain is the organ, like the radio, sitting in all of those radio waves, which is mind.
But that's not the case, right?
It may or may not be the case. I think it is the case, but it's not the only case. Just like the body is the case, but it's not the only case. I mean, the body's here. And so it's real from a certain perspective. But why does that mean that's the only thing? So we know the mind is there, we know the ego's there, and so these are more ethereal or thinner entities that represent being. So let's look at this again. Is happiness something that represents adding to yourself? Or is happiness represented by getting rid of something you already have?
Both.
It seems to be both, doesn't it? You want to talk that out? It seems to be both.
Yeah, obviously. Well, like the first simple answer that comes to mind is like letting go of unhealthy behavior and gaining more healthy behavior. Then it's just like, what do you define as healthy and unhealthy, which is circumstantial for each person.
Well, that's good. So healthy and unhealthy behavior. Healthy behavior we would think of would be something that would promote health and well-being.
Something that's healthy for like the body might not always be healthy for the mind too, though.
That's correct.
For example, like if you want to be really healthy, you're going to work out a ton, but if you become obsessive over it, that's not healthy for the mind, you know?
No, right.
So there's a correct balance for both.
There's a balance, right?
Uh-huh.
Is happiness dependent on getting rid of, at this stage of your evolution, or in terms of acquiring, and what does that mean for each?
Well, can you actually get rid of something without replacing it?
Wow, that's a very
That
good...
is a very good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's for you guys to consider. Can you get rid of something without replacing it with something else?
I don't think so.
I'd like to think so, but like right now, in terms of me, I don't think so.
If you stop arguing with your friend and you're at a resort and you go sit at the beach, have you gone away from the argument, or have you replaced the beach with the argument?
Well, I'm talking about in terms of growth and learning. Like, I have a problem with this, and so I'm going to deal with it in a different way. So no matter what, when you're dealing with it in a different way to try to overcome something such as reactivity, then you're replacing it.
That's correct. So is there no place for dropping both? So we have a world of duality, which means polarities. So we have one and one.
Oh, so we're constantly trying to, like right now, which is what you were asking, we're in the stage of replacement. But eventually, the new things that we are acquiring will just start to win. And it won't be to the other polarity, it will just be.
Okay, I get
Okay,
it.
good. Go.
Because as we keep replacing unhealthy behavior with healthy behavior, you get to a certain point where there's nothing left to replace, and then you can just be.
Good. You both have talked it out beautifully, and it's summed up by a sage who just said, use a thorn to dig that thorn out that you're suffering from, and then throw both away. So again, we've talked ourselves from just basic pleasurable life to an ultimate state of being where we're free from all of it. But let's back up and go back to the happiness in terms of duality. One and one make two. And that's where we are. We're going to be, to some extent, till we leave here, no matter how far we advance. But getting free of it in consciousness is important.
This just reminds me when I first started meeting with you, and I remember the day it was at Barnes & Noble, and you said to me, I think this was the first insight I ever had. You said 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, and it literally changed my life. But no, it's just crazy to me. 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2.
No, in the world of philosophy and metaphysics, 1 and 1 could begin to equal just 1, or many, or 0.
Depends what you do with it.
Depends what you do with it. What are you doing with 1 and 1? And so what does that mean when we say, what do you do with it? 1 and 1 equals drama. Polarity, right? Polarity. Black and white. Bad and good. Argumentation. Activity. Messing with the world. This is a level of the pleasant life. This is where, again, there's dealing with children, and dealing with marriage, and dealing with job, and dealing with possessions, and dealing with government, and dealing with friendship and enemies, and all manner, as we say, all manner of drama. What about the next stage? We're not going to go there yet, but that's the good life. And the question would be, now you're not going to have you answer it right now, but the question would be, how is the good life better than the pleasant life? The good life meaning a life that's involved with productivity, meaningful effort, giving and taking in good relationship.
Who has decided that that's what the good life is defined by?
A psychologist who used to be head of the American Psychological Association came up with these particular stages. They're just arbitrary. I have a more sophisticated map. Pleasant life, distraction, entertainment, the good life, productivity, compassion, self-improvement, education. These things don't sound at first blush as good as boats and motorcycles and a lot of sex and massages and a lot of drinking and alcohol. At first they don't sound as good, but we find that many people in that first pleasant life category wind up looking to get into the good life.
Why do you think people are so attracted to the pleasant life? Like, is it something that's in us, or is it a product of society?
It's mostly innate. It's an innate thing. We are made for pain and pleasure. The question was asked, if you had a choice, and the choice is, and you have to make it now,
Okay.
the choice is, you would never have pain again, any kind of pain, if you will only give up all future pleasure. Would you do it or not?
Yeah, isn't that kind of the goal?
Yes.
Isn't that it?
Good.
You're
answer.
rare.
Rare.
You're rare.
No, I'm
Now,
just
maybe
kidding.
people listening to this would not understand.
It's just basically going from 1 to 0.
It's
That's
basically going from 1 to 0. That's right. And saying, no, thank you.
No thanks.
No, thank you.
It is kind of a hard concept to grasp because we associate pain and pleasure as like a positive and a negative, but that's operating under duality. So if there was no pain and there was no pleasure, people would think that the absence of feeling would feel bad.
Correct. That's the assumption that if I don't have something to entertain or excite me, then I will not be happy.
And that revolves back around to, well, what is happiness?
When we try to play that out and say, well, no pain, no pleasure, going to wrap you in a blanket, no pain, no pleasure, sit in that chair and just be with yourself. Just be one. Not 0 yet, just one.
Isn't it funny how there's so many people that like would be uncomfortable with that? Just like scream at the thought of it.
Yeah, people
So
can't be with themselves.
They'd be alone with themselves. And so isn't our whole job, and especially for the purposes of this mystery studies, isn't our whole job then getting to a place where we don't need pain or pleasure and we could forsake it because we at least have arrived at level 1, contentment. Everything is neutral. Does that mean if everything is neutral for you that you could not enjoy or participate in something that was pleasurable?
I think that has to come after the fact.
Yeah. This is something I've struggled with like a lot in my own head lately too, because like if I get to that point, like all the things I love so much, being human and enjoying like in this world, I won't enjoy anymore. And it's really hard for me to kind of grasp the concept of that, but it's like I still will be able to, just in a completely different way. And I won't know until I get there.
You know, if you don't enjoy them, then you really don't enjoy them. And so what are you missing out on?
Well, if you don't enjoy something, which means I don't want it or don't like it, that's another component of pain, right? Or discomfort. When we say pain, we range from discomfort all the way to screaming horror pain. Somewhere in there. So even discomfort. If we make you comfortable, like in meditation, I say I guide meditation, and everybody just sits in comfort. There's no pain in the body. There's no draw to go somewhere else. Everything's neutral. We're as close to 0 as possible. How long can you endure that? How long can you stay there? Now we know what happens. The body begins to complain. Some kind of discomfort or pain starts to come up. My knee hurts. Or someone's calling me. Oh, I've got to return that call. Some kind of drama draws me away from it. But what if I'm in such a state where I say, I refuse. I'm not going to be involved in this at all. I'm fine. Even there, your mind, your ego will say, okay, well, we can get that later anyway. Right? That's what will happen. They'll say, well, we'll get that later anyway. We're going to give it up. Let's just give it up. No, we're surrender. And you stay. And you stay long enough that you have a peak experience on this particular occasion. Or you don't. You stay long enough and you still don't have a peak experience, but you are so completely content.